Let's read our text for this morning. Hebrews 12 from verse 25 to 29. Hebrews 12, verse 25 to verse 29. See that ye refuse not him that speaketh. For if they escaped not who refused him that spake on earth, much more shall not we escape, if we turn away from him that speaketh from heaven, whose voice then shook the earth. But now he hath promised, saying, this is the quotation from Habakkuk 2, which we read earlier, yet once more I shake not the earth only, but also heaven. And this word, yet once more, signifieth the removing of those things that are shaken, as of things that are made, that those things which cannot be shaken may remain. Wherefore, we receiving a kingdom which cannot be moved, let us have grace, whereby we may serve God acceptably with reverence and godly fear. For our God is a consuming fire. The second half of Hebrews 12 sets before the 1st century AD Jewish convert to Christianity two ways. He can wickedly go back from Jesus Christ and return to Old Testament law and Old Testament forms of worship. And this is represented in Hebrews 12, verses 18 through 21, as Mount Sinai. Listen to some of the key words in these verses, symbolizing what Sinai means. Burned, fire, blackness, darkness, tempest, stoned, terrible, fear. Is this what you want? Or, this is the other path, he can persevere with Jesus Christ and his gospel and church and worship. This is represented in verses 22 through 24 as not Mount Sinai, but Mount Zion. Mount Zion is in Jerusalem, the city of God, which is not in the Middle East, but in heaven. And those who come to Mount Zion have covenant fellowship with the holy angels, the living God, the perfected saints, and the glorified Christ. And this is the place, and this is the company to which you are come. Now, after the treatment of Mount Sinai, verses 18 through 21, and Mount Zion, verses 22 through 24, comes the exhortation, which flows from the comparison of the two mountains. Specifically, it says, verse 25, see that ye refuse not him that speaketh. Verse 28, let us have grace. That's what we need, whereby we may serve God acceptably with reverence and godly fear. And this arrangement is the norm in Hebrews. First exposition and then application. In fact, Hebrews 13 verse 22 calls the epistle to the Hebrews a, quote, word of exhortation. The whole epistle is in effect one large exhortation. And the exhortation is, first of all, a warning. Do not go back to apostate Judaism. Or for that matter, don't go back to any false religion or worldview. Don't head off to the Mecca of the Muslims, or the partying of the world, or the Big Bang of the evolutionists. For once you leave Jesus Christ and his church and worship for whatever destination, you only end up with blackness and fire, which symbolizes the eternal wrath of God and the great gulf that is fixed, with you on the wrong side of it, unable ever to get out. Besides this, Jesus Christ and his kingdom and gospel are better, far better than anything that the world or the false church or pagan religions have to offer. That's the positive exhortation. You've got a kingdom that cannot be moved, whereas everything else is going to be destroyed. Then you must have grace to serve the true and living God acceptably with reverence and godly fear. Consider then Mount Sion and Mount Sinai, the exhortation. Taking the two mountains looked at the previous 2 weeks, and then the exhortation which flows from the comparison. First, the warning of no escape. That's verse 25 especially. Then the shaking of heaven and earth, verses 26 and 27. And then the calling to godly fear, verses 28 and 29. Mount Zion and Mount Sinai, the exhortation. The warning of no escape, the shaking of heaven and earth, and the calling to godly fear. What happened to the unbelieving and disobedient in Old Testament Israel? Verse 25 says, "They escaped not who refused him that spake on earth." They didn't escape, they were punished. And this not escaping of Israel, but their being punished, refers first of all to the great sin on Mount Sinai soon after God thundered the law. Which great sin was the golden calf. And they didn't escape because God commanded the Levites to put their swords on and wade through Israel and slaughter them. And 3,000 bloodied corpses fell on that mountain. And then, that not being enough for punishment, God proceeded to inflict a terrible plague upon them. Read Exodus 32. But you can widen this out, this not escaping for the unbelieving and disobedient. You can widen this out to others who sinned in the wilderness wanderings. The blasphemer of Leviticus 24, the Sabbath breaker of Numbers 15, both were stoned to death by Israel. And 1 Corinthians chapter 10 lists other incidents. Verse 5, "With many of them God was not well pleased, to put it lightly, for they were overthrown in the wilderness." Verse 8, "Neither let us commit fornication, as some of them committed, and fell in one day 23,000. That was Baal Peor, Numbers 25. "Neither let us tempt Christ, as some of them also tempted, and were destroyed of serpents," in Numbers 21. "Neither murmur ye, as some of them also murmured, and were destroyed of the destroyer." An application is made to us not to fall into these same sins. And throughout the wilderness wanderings and afterwards in Israel's history, people were stoned, slain, and burnt. They did not escape. Of course, though, there were some unbelieving, rebellious Israelites who did escape earthly punishment, or at least were not executed by the Old Testament church in the form in which it then existed. Even then, they did not escape, because God's wrath was upon them all of their days in this world, and it is upon them now and forever in the next. Be assured, they escaped not who refused him that spake on earth.